But if your next delivery wasn't just a package, but your entire future? For Jiangshu, a routine drop-off at the Fu family mansion turned into a nightmare when she was suddenly forced to marry their comatose son as a good luck charm. The staff whispered she was merely an antidote for the poisoned CEO, a superstition they desperately clung to. But instead of revealing himself immediately, he watches his unwilling bride defend his honor against his scheming family members. In a world where 86% of arranged marriages are built on wealth or status, Jiangshu and Fu Linen's unexpected connection defies all odds. Will a marriage that began as a cruel joke transform into something real? Subscribe now to follow this roller coaster journey where betrayal, identity swaps, and family conspiracies threaten to destroy what might be the most unexpected love story of all. What if one delivery could change your entire life trajectory? For Jiangshu, the morning had begun like any other. Jiangshu fastened her delivery cap and straightened her simple uniform. The company logo faded from countless washes. She checked her phone for the day's assignments, mentally mapping the most efficient route through the congested city streets. This was her routine. Wait before dawn, deliver packages until dusk, return to her tiny apartment, sleep, and repeat. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest work that paid her modest rent and occasionally left enough for her to send money to her aging parents in their rural village. Jiangshu navigated through the urban landscape with practiced efficiency. Regular customers greeted her with familiar nods. The elderly man on the third floor who always offered her tea, the young mother who appreciated Jiangshu's patience when her toddler insisted on helping with the packages. These small moments of human connection brightened her otherwise exhausting days. She dreamed of saving enough to take night classes someday, perhaps in business or accounting. Nothing extravagant, just a step toward a life where her back didn't ache every night from carrying packages up countless flights of stairs. The notification for her final delivery of the day pinged, and Jiangshu's heart sank. The address was in the most exclusive district of the city, an area she rarely visited. These deliveries always made her uncomfortable. The scrutinizing gazes of security guards, the way wealthy recipients sometimes looked through her, as if she were merely an extension of the packages she carried. Still, a delivery was a delivery. She couldn't afford to be selective. As she approached the address, Jiangshu realized this wasn't just any wealthy residence. It was the Fu family mansion. Everyone in the city knew of the Fu family's vast business empire. Their name adorned skyscrapers, appeared in news headlines, and was whispered with a mixture of reverence and fear. Jiangshu had delivered to affluent homes before, but never to a compound that resembled a small principate. Imposing walls stretched in both directions, topped with discreet but unmistakable security cameras that tracked her approach. The intercom at the gate crackled to life before she could even press the button. "State your business," demanded a cold voice. "Package delivery for the Fu residence," Jiangshu responded, holding up the small parcel and her company ID toward the camera. After a prolonged silence that made her shift uncomfortably, the massive gates began to part. The driveway stretched before her like a private road, lined with meticulously trimmed topiary and fountains that probably cost more than she would earn in several lifetimes. For the first time that day, Jiangshu felt acutely aware of her worn shoes and the sweat stains under the arms of her uniform. A stone-faced security guard met her halfway, extending his hand for the package. "I'll take it from here." "I'm sorry, but I need a signature from the recipient," Jiangshu explained, clutching her digital tablet. Company policy was strict about this, especially for high-value deliveries. The guard's expression darkened. "Wait here," he commanded, retreating toward the main house while speaking rapidly into his earpiece. Minutes stretched uncomfortably as Jiangshu stood alone on the immaculate driveway. The late afternoon sun beat down on her, but she dared not seek shade beneath the elegant trees that dotted the landscape. She felt like an intruder, a smudge on an otherwise perfect painting. Through the mansion's massive windows, she glimpsed crystal chandeliers that caught the sunlight and fractured it into thousands of rainbow shards across marble floor. Staff members in formal attire moved with practiced precision, their expressions tense and guarded when they glanced in her direction. When the guard returned, he was accompanied by an older woman in an impeccably tailored suit. "You'll need to come inside," the woman announced, her tone leaving no room for discussion. "I just need a signature," Jiangshu protested weakly, but the woman had already turned, clearly expecting to be followed without question. The interior of the Fu mansion made Jiangshu's breath catch. Ancient artifacts that belonged in museums stood in glass cases alongside contemporary art pieces, worth more than her entire apartment building. Her warm delivery uniform felt like a costume in this setting, her presence a disruption to the careful harmony of wealth and power. Staff members paused their activities to watch as she was led through a series of increasingly opulent rooms, their whispers following her like shadows. "Wait here," the woman instructed, gesturing to a chair that looked too expensive to sit on. "Someone will be with you shortly to sign for the package." But as minutes turned to an hour, Jiangshu realized something was amiss. When she attempted to leave, explaining that she had other deliveries, 2 security guards materialized to escort her back to the waiting area. Her protests about needing to complete her route were met with vague assurances that this won't take much longer. Her phone showed no signal inside the mansion's thick walls, a convenience for the family's privacy that now felt deliberately isolating. Just as panic began to take root, 3 people entered the room. An elderly woman whose posture radiated authority despite her diminutive stature, a middle-aged man in a doctor's coat, and a younger man whose resemblance to faces she'd seen in business magazines was unmistakable. The Fu family representatives had arrived, but not for the package that now seemed like a flimsy pretense. "Jiangshu," the elderly woman said, pronouncing her name with perfect intonation. It wasn't a question. "We have a proposition for you." The proposition was so outlandish that Jiangshu initially believed it to be an elaborate joke. The Fu family's eldest son and heir, Fu Linan, lay in a coma after a mysterious poisoning incident. Traditional beliefs held that a good-luck bride could help reverse his fortune, drawing out the poison and restoring his health. They wanted her, a complete stranger, to marry their unconscious son in a ceremony that would be legally binding in every sense. "Me?" Jiangshu managed to ask, her voice barely audible in the cavernous room. "The fortune teller was specific," the elderly woman explained, with chilling pragmatism. "A woman of humble origins, born in the year of the rabbit, whose name contains the character for dawn. You match all requirements." The younger man, Fu Linan's brother, she realized, smiled without warmth. "You'll be generously compensated, of course. More money than you would earn in 20 years of delivering packages," the doctor added softly. "It would be a great service to the family. Fu Linan's condition is deteriorating, despite our best efforts." Jiangshu's mind raced with contradictory thought. This was absurd, exploitative, possibly illegal. Yet refusing the Fu family could have consequences she couldn't begin to imagine. They clearly knew details about her birth year, the meaning of her name, suggesting they'd investigated her before she'd even arrived. The power imbalance was so vast that choice felt like an illusion. "You have until tomorrow morning to decide," the elderly woman concluded, signaling the end of the discussion. "You'll stay here tonight as our guest, for your own privacy and safety, of course." As Jiangshu was led to a guest suite larger than her entire apartment, the full weight of her situation crashed down upon her. She stood at the precipice of 2 divergent futures: refuse and potentially face the wrath of the city's most powerful family, or accept and enter a world governed by rules she didn't understand. Married to a man she had never met, who might never wake up. The gilded cage of luxury surrounding her offered no comfort as she contemplated sacrificing her modest but independent life for reasons that seemed rooted more in superstition than sense. Luxury can be the cruelest prison when it comes with conditions that strip away your identity. As Jiangshu walked through the palatial hallways of her new home, she felt the weight of invisible chains with each step. The staff no longer addressed her by name. She had become the antidote, a living remedy, rather than a person. The transformation from independent woman to medicinal property had happened overnight, sealed with papers she signed at dawn after a sleepless night. The Fu family matriarch, a woman in her 60s with perfectly coiffed silver hair and eyes that calculated your worth before you finished speaking, summoned Jiangshu to her private study on the second morning. Madame Fu sat behind an antique rosewood desk, her posture rigid as a statue as she outlined Jiangshu's new reality without a flicker of emotion. "Your presence in this house serves one purpose," Madame Fu stated, her manicured fingers tapping a folder containing the marriage certificate. "The fortune teller was specific about the requirements. Now that you've fulfilled them by becoming my son's wife, you will adhere to certain protocols." Her voice carried the clinical precision of someone discussing a business transaction rather than a family matter. "You will not leave the estate without permission. You will not speak to the press. You will present yourself as befits the Fu family name when required for appearances. You will visit my son's room daily, as the doctors believe your presence may aid his recovery." Jiangshu stood silently, noting how none of these protocols acknowledged her as a person with thoughts or feelings. When she dared ask about the nature of Fu Linyan's condition, Madame Fu's lips thinned to a disapproving line. "Information is unnecessary for your function," she replied dismissively. "Just understand that your marriage to him serves a purpose beyond your comprehension. Do not mistake your position for importance." The threat, though unspoken, hung clearly in the air. "Remember, you are replaceable." Throughout her first week, Jiangshu attempted to piece together information about her unconscious husband's condition. The medical staff, who cycled through Fu Lian's suite, spoke in hushed technical terms, often falling silent when they noticed her presence. From these fragmented conversations, she gathered that his coma resulted from some form of poisoning, though the specifics remained elusive. During her mandated visits to Fu Linan's room, Jiangshu found herself drawn to the mystery of this man, who was legally her husband, yet remained a stranger. His private medical suite resembled a hospital room, disguised as a luxury apartment. Sophisticated monitoring equipment surrounded the large bed, where Fu Linan lay still as stone, his breathing so shallow it sometimes seemed absent. Despite his unconscious state, his face retained the sharp, handsome features prominent in the business magazines she'd occasionally glimpsed. Something about his peaceful expression contrasted sharply with the cutthroat reputation that preceded the Fu name in business circles. The household staff had prepared a wardrobe for Jiangshu that could have clothed a small village in luxury. Designer labels she'd only seen in advertisements now lined her closet, yet each item felt like another form of control. The clothes weren't gifts, but uniforms, costumes for a role she'd been forced to play. Her bedroom suite, larger than her former apartment building's entire floor, became its own form of isolation. The staff entered without knocking, rearranged her few personal possessions without permission, and monitored her movements with polite but unwavering vigilance. By her second week, Jiangshu began to comprehend the true extent of the Fu family's influence. A casual mention of a competitor during dinner resulted in that company's stock plummeting the following day. A minor complaint about a local official from Madame Fu led to a public resignation within hours. The Fu empire extended far beyond their visible business holdings into a shadow network of political connections, media influences, and financial leverage that could reshape reality with frightening efficiency. One afternoon, while passing an open door, Jiangshu overheard a household manager instructing a new staff member. "Remember, she's not a guest, she's the antidote." The young master's fortune teller was explicit about her purpose. Treat her with appropriate respect, but never forget her function. The words stung, despite her growing numbness to such dehumanization. That evening, during her scheduled visit to Fu Linan's room, something shifted within Jiangshu. After the medical staff departed, leaving her for the customary 15 minutes of proximately therapy the fortune teller had prescribed, she found her speaking aloud for the first time to her unconscious husband. "I don't know if you can hear me," she began, her voice tentative in the quiet room, "but I think you should know who you're married to now." She straightened her shoulders and continued with growing confidence. "My name is Jiangshu. I was a delivery person before I came here. I had dreams of studying business someday. Now, I'm apparently your antidote, though nobody will explain exactly what that means." The one-sided conversation brought unexpected comfort. In this room, speaking to someone who couldn't interrupt or dismiss her, Jiangshu reclaimed a small piece of her identity. "Your family treats me like a superstitious remedy, but I want you to know I'm a person. If you can hear me somewhere in there, I hope you remember that." This became her daily ritual, these private moments of dignity, when she could speak honestly without fear of reprisal. Sometimes she described her day. Other times she shared memories of her life before the Fu mansion. Occasionally, she even dared to critique the family's treatment of her, finding catharsis in voicing frustrations she couldn't express elsewhere. During her third week, Jiangshu noticed the clinical sterility of Fu Linan's suite, expensive but impersonal, like a high-end hospital room. rather than someone's living space. The next morning she woke early and slipped into the mansion's extensive gardens before the household fully stirred. She carefully selected a small bouquet of seasonal blooms, arranged them in a simple glass she'd brought from her room, and placed them on Fu Linen's bedside table. "Everyone treats you like you're already gone," she told his still form. "But until proven otherwise, I'm going to assume you're still in there somewhere." The flowers added a touch of life to the sterile environment, a small rebellion against the clinical atmosphere that reduced both of them to medical conditions rather than people. Each morning after, she repeated this gesture, replacing yesterday's flowers with fresh ones. No one commented on this unauthorized addition to the room. Perhaps they assumed another staff member had placed them there, or maybe they deemed the transgression too minor to address. For Jiangshu, these flowers represented her refusal to be completely controlled, a daily reminder. As weeks passed, she developed a deeper connection to the unconscious man she'd been forced to marry. Through her daily one-sided conversations, Fu Linan transformed from a stranger to someone familiar. She studied the subtle changes in his breathing patterns, the occasional flutter of his eyelids during REM sleep, the almost imperceptible reactions to external stimuli that the medical staff documented meticulously. "The doctors say your brain activity increases sometimes when there's conversation in the room," she told him one afternoon. "I wonder if that means you can hear me. If you can, I hope my voice is at least more interesting than the endless medical discussions." She paused, studying his face for any reaction. "I brought peonies today. The gardener says they symbolize healing in some cultures. I don't know if I believe in symbols anymore, but they're beautiful, and this room could use more beauty." In these private moments, Jianshu refused to be merely the antidote. She spoke to Fu Linan with respect and humanity, treating him not as the unconscious body his family used as a centerpiece in their power plays, but as a person deserving of dignity. This small daily act of compassion became her quiet resistance against a system determined to reduce them both to functions rather than people. "Sometimes I wonder what you were like before all this," she confided one evening. "Were you kind? Were you as calculating as the rest of your family? I suppose everyone has their own version of you in their minds, and none of them might be accurate." She adjusted his blanket with care. "I hope someday you wake up and get to decide who you really are again. We both deserve that much." Behind every smile at the Fu mansion lurked a shadow with ambitions that thrived in darkness. As Jiangshu developed her quiet routine with Fu Linan, she failed to notice another pair of eyes tracking her movements through the mansion's grand corridors, a gaze that carried the weight of thwarted birthright with every glance at his brother's unconscious form. Fu Cheng, the second son of the Fu dynasty, approached Jiangshu 3 weeks after her arrival, intercepting her as she left his brother's suite. His smile radiated warmth that never quite reached his eyes. "Sister-in-law," he said, the familial title sliding from his tongue with practiced ease. "I've been meaning to properly welcome you. It must be overwhelming to suddenly find yourself here, among us." The younger Fu brother stood tall and elegant in a tailored suit that emphasized his athletic build, a stark contrast to his bedridden sibling. Where Fu Linan's medical charts showed a man fighting for consciousness, Fu Cheng exuded vitality and charm, gesturing with manicured hands as he spoke of family traditions and business matters. "Please, think of me as your guide," he offered, walking alongside her toward the east wing. "The Fu family can be complicated for outsiders to navigate. I'd be honored to help my brother's wife find her footing." Jiangshu noticed how his emphasis on the word wife carried a subtle undertone of mockery, though his expression remained perfectly pleasant. Still, she welcomed any friendly face in this labyrinth of luxury and tension. The first signs of Fu Cheng's true nature emerged during a family brunch the following weekend. As conversations about market shares and corporate acquisitions flowed around the table, Fu Cheng turned to Jiangshu with a smile that failed to mask the calculating gleam in his eyes. "Sister-in-law, perhaps you could offer your perspective on the shipping industry," he suggested innocently. "After all, your experience in deliveries must have given you unique insights into logistics that our board members might find illuminating." The table fell silent as all eyes turned to her. The matriarch's gaze narrowed, while 2 visiting executives exchanged uncomfortable glances. "I believe my experience is rather different from what you're discussing," Jiangshu replied carefully, though I'd be happy to learn more about your business concerns. Fu Cheng's smile tightened fractionally. Of course, I simply thought you might want to contribute to the conversation. After all, you are a Fu now, aren't you? At least in name. These subtle digs continued for weeks. At formal dinners, Fu Chen would innocently reference her background when introducing her to business associates. My sister-in-law comes from such humble beginnings, he would say, with a sympathetic smile. It's remarkable how fate can transform someone's circumstances overnight. The culmination of his manipulation came during an important family ceremony, commemorating the company's founding. Sister-in-law, I noticed you haven't prepared the ancestral offering. Allow me to assist you. He guided her through selecting specific items for the ceremonial table, assuring her that his instructions reflected tradition. Only when Jianshu placed her carefully arranged tray before the assembled family did she realize something was terribly wrong. Madame Fu's face hardened into a mask of disapproval, while whispers rippled through the gathered relatives. How dare you, the matriarch hissed. To place items of white on the ancestral altar is to wish death upon the family. Is this your hope for my son? Fu Qian stepped forward, his expression a perfect mask of apologetic concern. Mother, I'm certain sister-in-law meant no disrespect. She simply doesn't understand our ways, yet. The public humiliation burned through Jiangshu like acid. Later, catching a glimpse of Fu Qiang's satisfied smile when he thought no one was watching, she understood with painful clarity. This had been deliberately orchestrated. As Fu Linian's condition showed marginal improvements, Fu Cheng's tactics intensified. During a dinner with key investors, he raised his glass in a toast that felt more like an indictment. My brother's unusual marriage, he announced, commanding the attention of everyone present, and to his wife, who joined our family under such unique circumstances. One must wonder what my brother would think of this arrangement, were he able to express his opinion. One of the senior board members frowned. I understood the marriage was arranged with proper consultation of the family council. Indeed, Fu Qian replied smoothly, though some arrangements serve certain parties better than others. If my brother never recovers, his assets would be managed by his wife, rather than remaining under direct family control. An interesting position for someone so new to our world. Wouldn't you agree? The implication hung in the air like poison. Jiangshu maintained her composure, though her knuckles whitened around her water glass. It was pure chance that led her to Fu Cheng's office 3 days later. Seeking a quiet place to collect herself after another tense family meal, she slipped into what she thought was an unused study, only to discover Fu Cheng's private workspace. As she turned to leave, a folder on his desk caught her eye. Her husband's name emblazoned across the tab in bold red characters. Heart racing, she hesitated only briefly before approaching the desk. The folder contained medical reports dating back months before Fu Linen's poisoning, along with surveillance photos of his daily routines and chemical analyses of substances with names she couldn't pronounce. Most disturbing was a handwritten timeline that mapped her husband's gradual exposure to something called compound RX7, with calculating notes about dosage and anticipated organ failure rates. The sound of approaching footsteps forced her to quickly replace the documents and slip behind a heavy curtain. From her hiding place, she watched Fu Qiang enter with the family lawyer, their conversation confirming her worst fears. The longer he remains alive, the more complicated this becomes, Fu Qiang said, frustration evident in his voice. This peasant girl was supposed to be a temporary solution, a symbolic gesture to appease mother's superstitions, while nature took its course with my brother. Patience, young master, the lawyer counseled. The girl has no actual power. Once your brother passes, contesting the marriage will be simple enough. After they departed, Jiangshu remained frozen in place, the reality of her situation crashing down upon her. She wasn't just an unwanted addition to a wealthy family. She was an obstacle in a calculated murder plot. The confrontation came sooner than she anticipated. The following evening, as she returned from Fu Linen's room, Fu Cheng intercepted her in the dimly lit corridor, his charming facade completely absent. I know you were in my office, he stated flatly, his voice carrying none of its usual performative warmth. Jianshu straightened her posture, refusing to be intimidated despite the hammering of her heart. I got lost. The mansion is quite large. Fu Chen's laugh held no humor. Let me be clear, he said, stepping closer. Know your place in this house. You are nothing but a temporary distraction, a superstitious token my mother insisted upon. You have no real status here, no allies, no power." His eyes hardened as he continued, "I've spent my entire life preparing to lead this company, while my brother enjoyed the privileges of being firstborn. I won't allow a delivery girl to interfere with what's rightfully mine." The threat hung between them, undisguised and severe. "Remember," he added softly, "accidents happen in wealthy families all the time. Sometimes to brothers, sometimes to their inconvenient wives." In the stillness of Fu Linen's medical suite, a peculiar intimacy had begun to take root. What started as awkward, one-sided conversations had evolved into Jiangshu's daily ritual of sanctuary. Here, away from prying eyes and malicious whispers, she could be herself without judgment. "The chef made your favorite steamed fish today," she said while arranging fresh chrysanthemums beside his bed. "At least, your mother said it was your favorite. I wonder if that's actually true, or if she just decided it for you." She paused, studying his face, the strong jawline, the peaceful expression that betrayed nothing of the brilliant business mind supposedly trapped within. "I never asked what foods you actually enjoy. There's so much about you I don't know. Yet here I am, playing the role of devoted wife." The monitors hummed steadily, their rhythmic beeping a constant companion to her monologues. She'd grown accustomed to their melody, could distinguish the slightest variations in pattern, which is why, when she mentioned her encounter with Fu Cheng that morning, the subtle acceleration in the heart monitor's cadence cost her attention. She froze mid-sentence, eyes darting between the monitor and Fu Linen's face. Had his breathing pattern changed slightly too, becoming shallower for just a moment? "Did you hear that?" she whispered, leaning closer. The moment passed, everything returning to its steady rhythm. Jiangshu shook her head, chiding herself for imagining responses where there were none. The doctors had explained that comatose patients often had involuntary physiological reactions. Nothing to read into, yet something about that particular moment left her wondering. Over the following days, she began paying closer attention to these subtle shifts. The slight twitch of his index finger when she mentioned company stock figures, the almost imperceptible change in breathing when she spoke about specific family members. Was her mind manufacturing patterns out of desperate hope, or was something more happening behind those closed eyelids? The Glasgow Coma Scale placed Fu Linan at a mid-range score. Not deeply comatose, but not showing obvious signs of consciousness either. His doctors maintained that his prognosis remained uncertain, the timeline for recovery impossible to predict. Yet Jiangshu couldn't shake the feeling that somewhere behind the medical equipment and clinical assessments, Fu Linan was more present than anyone realized. One afternoon, she overheard two nursing assistants gossiping outside his door. "Such a waste," one said. "He was brilliant before this happened. Now, he's just an empty shell the family parades around for sympathy. And that poor delivery girl they trapped into marrying him," the other replied with a snicker. "She probably thought she hit the jackpot, but all she got was a vegetable for a husband." Jiang stepped into view, her voice cutting through their laughter. "Mr. Fu is not a vegetable. He's a person who deserves dignity and respect, especially from those paid to care for him." Her voice remained steady despite her racing heart. "And I'd appreciate if you'd use proper medical terminology, rather than cruel labels when discussing patients." The assistants scattered with mumbled apologies, unaware that Fu Linen's heart monitor had briefly spiked during the entire exchange. Only Jiangshu noticed, filing the observation away with growing suspicion. That evening, she made a decision. If there was even the slightest chance that Fu Linan could hear and understand, she would provide him with more than just idle chatter. "I'm going to bring you back into your world," she promised him quietly. "Even if you can't respond, you deserve to know what's happening to your company, your legacy." The next day, she began smuggling business reports into his room. Quarterly statements, market analyses, competitor movements, information that Fu Qian had deliberately kept from her, claiming it wasn't her place to involve herself in company matters. She read them aloud during her visits, explaining concepts she understood from her limited business knowledge and asking questions about those. "Your Western expansion seems to be stalling," she noted one afternoon, flipping through confidential documents she'd discovered in his study. "The Seattle project is 3 months behind schedule. Your brother hasn't mentioned this to the board yet. I wonder why." As she spoke, she noticed his pulse quicken slightly on the monitor. "Should I be concerned about that?" One blink if yes, she said spontaneously, then immediately felt foolish for suggesting such an impossible response. But then, it happened. A single, distinct eyelid flutter. Jiangshu dropped the report, papers scattering across the polished floor. She stared at him, breath caught in her throat. Had she imagined it? Fu Linan? She whispered. Can you hear me? One blink for yes, two for no. Nothing happened for several long seconds. Then, unmistakably, his eyelid lowered and raised, once. The realization crashed over her like a tidal wave. He wasn't just hearing her, he was responding. For how long had he been trapped in his own body, conscious but unable to communicate? The thought of such forced dependence, of being aware while everyone discussed you as if you were an object, sent a shiver down her spine. Over the next week, they developed their secret language. Single blinks, subtle finger movements, changes in breathing pattern. Through these limited signals, Jiangshu began to understand the truth. Fu Linan had been regaining consciousness, gradually, for weeks, but had chosen to remain comatose, to observe who could be trusted. The monitors hadn't been registering random fluctuations. They'd been recording his emotional responses to everything happening around him. During one evening visit, after ensuring they were truly alone, Jiangshu shared a painful story from her childhood. How she'd once been accused of stealing by a wealthy customer on her first delivery job. How no one had believed her innocence because of her background. Sometimes I still feel like that little girl, she admitted, especially here, where everyone sees me as an intruder. As she finished speaking, she noticed something extraordinary, a single tear rolling down Fu Linan's cheek. The sight of that solitary tear, the physical manifestation of emotion from a supposedly unconscious man, broke something open inside her. She reached forward instinctively, catching the tear with her fingertip. You're really in there, aren't you? She whispered. All this time, watching, listening, unable to move or speak. The full weight of his isolation hit her then. The psychological impact of being fully aware while treated as an object, of witnessing betrayal without the ability to confront it, of being completely dependent on others for every basic need. Behind Fu Linan's closed eyes, a world of consciousness thrived. He'd first become aware of his surroundings in fragments, voices floating in darkness, sensations without context. As the weeks passed, his awareness had sharpened. He'd listened as doctors discussed his condition in clinical terms. He'd felt the cold efficiency of nurses changing IV lines and checking vitals. He'd endured his mother's performative grief and his brother's thinly veiled satisfaction. Then, Jiangshu had arrived, and everything changed. At first, she was just another voice, hesitant, uncomfortable. But unlike others who spoke about him, she spoke to him. She brought freshness into his sterile prison with flowers and honest conversation. While everyone else projected their own narratives onto his silent form, she asked questions as if expecting him to someday answer them. Outside the protective walls of Fu Linan's medical suite, the world continued its relentless motion. For Jiangshu, thrust suddenly into high society, danger lurked beneath polished smiles and crystal champagne flutes. This became painfully clear on the night of the Lu Foundation charity gala, an event that would leave its scars long after the evening gowns were hung away. The Grand Imperial Hotel's ballroom glittered with wealth and influence. Crystal chandeliers cast honeyed light over Shanghai's elite, while waiters circulated with trays of champagne, worth more than Jiangshu's former weekly salary. She stood at the periphery of a conversation circle, her burgundy gown selected by Madame Fu's personal stylist, feeling like an elaborate costume. Though exquisite, the heavy silk reminded her with every movement that she didn't belong. Mrs. Fu, what a pleasure to finally meet you. A middle-aged man with silver temples approached, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. Qiang Yan, Meridian Technologies. His handshake lingered a beat too long as he studied her, the mysterious bride who appeared from nowhere to save our city's most eligible bachelor. Jiangshu recognized the name immediately from the business reports she'd read to Fu Linan. Meridian had been trying to acquire Fu Industries' semiconductor division for years, facing constant rejection. The pleasure is mine, she replied, keeping her expression neutral while mentally cataloging every detail about him. Fu Linyan would want to know about this interaction. Such a tragedy about your husband. Zhang lowered his voice conspiratorially. I understand his prospects for recovery are limited. The calculated cruelty of the statement made her fingers tighten around her clutch. The doctors are quite encouraged by recent developments, actually, she countered, remembering Fu Linen's single blink that morning, their private code for "be careful tonight." A flicker of something, disappointment, crossed Xian's features before his smile returned. "Wonderful news. I'd love to discuss potential collaborations between our companies sometime. Perhaps over dinner?" Before Jiangshu could formulate a response that wouldn't reveal her disgust, a woman in a shimmering blue dress appeared at her side. "Mrs. Fu, I've been hoping to meet you." The woman's warm smile seemed genuine compared to Xiang's predatory one. "I'm Lin Mei. Would you mind if I borrowed you for just a moment? There's someone who's absolutely dying to meet the woman who's captured the heart of Fu Linen." Grateful for the extraction, Jiangshu excused herself. As they walked, Lin Mei kept up a steady stream of conversation, steering them away from the main ballroom toward a quieter corridor. "It's overwhelming, isn't it? All these people pretending to care about charity when they're really here to make deals and spread gossip." The observation was so accurate that Jiangshu allowed herself to relax slightly. "I'm still adjusting to all of this." "Of course you are, dear. It must be such a whirlwind." Lin Mei guided her through a service door. "This way. It's quieter back here. The person I want you to meet is more private." Alarm bells began ringing in Jiangshu's mind as they entered a dimly lit corridor far from the event. She slowed her steps. "I should let Mr. Chen know where I am." Chen was her assigned security detail for the evening. Lin Mei's friendly demeanor shifted subtly. "Oh, he knows. We informed him earlier." The lie was obvious. Jiangshu turned to retreat, but two men had materialized behind them, blocking her path. One was Sheng Yiwang from Meridian Technologies. "Monsieur," Xian said pleasantly, as if they were still chatting over champagne, "I believe we have unfinished business to discuss." Lin Mei's grip on her arm tightened painfully. "Don't make a scene. It would be embarrassing for everyone." They herded her into an empty conference room, where a third man waited. The door clicked shut behind them. "Do you want?" Jiangshu asked, her voice steadier than she felt. "Information?" Xiang loosened his tie. "You have access to Fu Linen's private affairs in ways no one else does. Project Cerberus, specifically. We know it's the reason Meridian's acquisition offers keep getting rejected." Her mind raced through the reports she'd read. Project Cerberus was mentioned only once. A heavily encrypted file Fu Lianan had apparently been reviewing the day before his poisoning. "I don't know anything about that," she said truthfully. The third man stepped forward. "Your parents live in Anhui Province, correct? Small farming village? They received 20,000 yuan last month from you." He smiled thinly. "It would be unfortunate if something happened to their modest home." A surge of primal fear shot through her, as her body's fight-or-flight response activated. Her heart hammered against her ribs, while her breathing quickened involuntarily. The threat to her parents triggered not just fear, but a deep, visceral rage. "You claim to be business people, but you're nothing but common thugs," she said, backing away until she felt the conference table behind her. Lin Chai slapped her hard across the face. "Watch your tongue. You're nothing but a delivery girl who got lucky. Give us what we need, and this ends tonight." The physical shock of the blow crystallized something within Jiangshu. These people threatened not just her, but the parents who had sacrificed everything to give her a better life. In that moment of clarity, she realized her loyalty to Fu Lian wasn't just about their strange arrangement. It was about the fundamental decency he'd shown her when others saw her as merely useful. "I won't help you," she stated firmly. Xiang nodded to the other man, who moved toward her with menacing purpose. Jiangshu grabbed a heavy crystal paperweight from the table and held it up defensively. "This will go easier if you cooperate," Xiang said, his tone suggesting he was discussing a minor business negotiation rather than an assault. The door burst open with such force that it slammed against the wall. Fu Qiang stood in the doorway, flanked by security personnel. "I believe you're accosting my sister-in-law," he said, his voice glacial. "An interesting business strategy, Qiangyang. I wonder how your board would view attempted corporate espionage and assault." The security team moved swiftly, separating Jiangshu from her attackers. As they were escorted out, Fu Qiang approached her, examining her reddened cheek with cold efficiency. "Are you injured?" he asked, his tone more clinical than concerned. She managed, still trembling from adrenaline. "Good. A hospital visit would generate unwanted publicity." He straightened his already immaculate tie. "You'll return to the gala with me. We'll leave in exactly 45 minutes. Until then, smile and pretend this never happened." The callousness of his response stunned her, They threatened my parents. I'll have security stationed near their home by morning." He regarded her with detached assessment. "Don't misunderstand. This isn't personal concern. You're a Fu family asset now. We protect what belongs to us." As they walked back toward the glittering ballroom, Jiangchu understood with perfect clarity her position. Fu Qian hadn't rescued her. He'd simply prevented damage to family property. His intervention wasn't motivated by human compassion, but by cold calculations of family interests. Yet beneath her shock and fear lurked another emotion: determination. These people saw her as nothing more than a pawn. Fu Qiangqi, a leverage, Li Mian's delivery girl who got lucky. But in Fu Linan's room, communicating through blinks and subtle finger movements, she was something else entirely. A person whose voice was heard and valued. The night's events had left Jiangxu with bruises both visible and hidden, but it was what happened when she returned to Fu Linan's bedside that would alter the course of her fate forever. Her steps faltered as she closed the door behind her, the protective facade she'd maintained throughout the evening crumbling now that she was alone. Or as alone as she could be, with a supposedly unconscious man in the room. Her hands trembled as she sank into the bedside chair, the expensive fabric of her gala dress rustling against the leather. For weeks, she had maintained composure in this room, reading business reports with steady professionalism, sharing observations about the household with casual detachment. But tonight, the weight of everything, Xiang Wei's threats, the revelations about Project Cerberus, the feeling of Fu Qian's grip on her arm as he'd extracted her from danger, pressed down on her until something broke inside. "I don't know what I'm doing here anymore," she whispered, her voice catching. "They all want something from me, but I don't understand what. Your brother treats me like property to be guarded. Your mother looks through me like I'm made of glass. And people I've never met seem to think I have access to company secrets." Her fingers curled into the bedsheets. "I'm not anyone important. I was just a delivery girl." The steady beep of Fu Lianen's heart monitor quickened almost imperceptibly. Jiangxu lifted her head, watching the green line jump a little higher on the screen. She'd spent enough time in this room to recognize patterns in the equipment's feedback. And this was different. His heart rate had accelerated precisely as her emotional state intensified. Can you hear me?" she asked, suddenly self-conscious about her outburst. The room remained silent, except for the slightly faster beeping. Hesitantly, as if pulling her hand through water, Jiangxu reached for Fu Linen's limp fingers. They felt warm, warmer than a comatose person's should be, a part of her mind noted. She wrapped her smaller hand around his, seeking comfort from the only person who couldn't judge or manipulate her. "I wish you could tell me what to do," she murmured. "This is your family, your company, your world. I'm just an accidental tourist who can't find the exit." The pressure against her palm, so slight she might have imagined it, made her freeze. Fu Linen's index finger had moved, pressing against her hand in what couldn't possibly be a random muscle spasm. It was too deliberate, too responsive to her words. Jiangxu stared at their joined hands, heartbeat thundering in her ears. "If you can hear me," she said, carefully measuring each word, "press my hand again." 1 second passed, 2, then a distinct pressure against her palm, his finger curling inward with purpose. A gasp escaped her lips as she leaned closer, studying his face with new intensity. The perfectly still features, the closed eyelids, the passive expression, all appeared unchanged. Yet something fundamental had shifted in the room. "You're conscious," she whispered. Not a question, but a realization. "You've been aware this whole time, haven't you?" His eyelids fluttered once, so subtly it would be imperceptible to anyone not watching for it. Over the next hour, through a halting process of trial and error, Jiangxu established a rudimentary communication system. 1 blink meant yes, 2 blinks meant no. A squeeze of the fingers indicated uncertainty or complexity beyond simple answers. "How long have you been aware?" she asked, her mind racing through implications. His response, a pattern of blinks and finger movements, suggested weeks, not days. Long enough to have heard her reading financial reports, sharing news about the Seattle project delays, discussing the strange dynamics of his family. Long enough to witness her defending him to dismissive medical staff, placing fresh flowers on his nightstand, speaking to him with a respect few others bothered to show. "Does anyone else know you're conscious?" she asked, heart pounding at the enormity of their secret. Two distinct blinks. No. Why did you reveal yourself to me? Why now? The question tumbled from her lips before she could consider its implication, that she was somehow special, somehow different from the parade of doctors, nurses, family members, and business associates who cycled through his room. His response was more complex, a pattern they hadn't quite established yet. But the slight upward curve of his mouth, a movement so subtle it barely disturbed the serene mask of his face, conveyed what words couldn't. Trust. He trusted her. Over the following days, Jiangshu developed their private language further. Beyond the simple yes/no system, they established patterns of blinks and subtle finger movements to communicate more complex ideas. 3 quick blinks meant danger. A light scratch against her palm with his index finger indicated he needed her to check something specific. A circular motion with his thumb meant she should proceed with caution. During the daylight hours, Jiangshu maintained her role as the dutiful, somewhat naive wife. She attended family meals, nodded respectfully to Madame Fu, and kept a wary distance from Fu Cheng. But in the sanctuary of Fu Lianen's medical suite, she became something else. His voice, his eyes, his connection to the world beyond his bed. The doctors say your muscles are showing unusual activity for someone in your condition, she told him one evening, closing the door softly. A series of rapid blinks. Concern. You're worried they'll discover you're conscious, Jiangshu translated, sitting beside him. But why keep it secret? Wouldn't it be easier to just wake up officially, take control again? His answer came slowly, each movement deliberate. Not safe. Traitor, close. Need proof. You think someone in your inner circle poisoned you, she whispered, the reality of their situation crashing down anew. And you're using this time to figure out who it was. One definitive blink. Yes, that's why you're letting me read you the reports, why you're having me observe everyone's reactions, she realized. You're gathering intelligence before you make your move. Again, that subtle, affirming blink. So, what am I in all this? Jiangshu asked, vulnerability bleeding into her voice. Just another pair of eyes for you? Another strategic asset? His fingers sought hers with unexpected strength, gripping them with an intensity that belied his supposed weakness. The monitor beside his bed registered the spike in his heart rate as his eyes opened fully for the first time in their private conversations, fixing on hers with startling clarity and emotion. Not just asset, partner. The word hung between them, transforming the air in the room. Not wife. That was a legal fiction constructed for survival. Not servant. Despite the power imbalance between them, partner. Equal in purpose, if not in status or background. Then we need a plan, Jianqun said, her voice steadier than before. If we're partners, we need to establish what each of us brings to this alliance. Over the next hour, they mapped out their strategy. Fu Linen would continue his conscious coma, gathering information through Jiangshu's observations and the conversations people had at his bedside, believing him unaware. Jiangshu would use her position as his wife to access files, observe family dynamics, and report back during their private sessions. Together they would piece together who had orchestrated his poisoning and why. We're strangers bound by circumstance, Jiangshu acknowledged as their discussion concluded. But I promise you this. I will help you uncover the truth, regardless of where it leads or who it implicates. That promise would be tested sooner than either of them anticipated. With Fu Lianan's secret consciousness known only to her, Jiangshu slipped his signet ring onto her finger, her new permission to access areas of the mansion previously forbidden to her. She studied her reflection in the ornate hallway mirror, straightening her shoulders beneath the weight of her dual identities. To the household, she remained the superstitious token bride. Privately, she had become Fu Linian's most trusted investigator. Mrs. Fu, may I ask what you're doing in this wing? A stern-faced housekeeper appeared around the corner, eyeing the signet ring with barely concealed suspicion. Jiangshu lowered her eyes and practiced deference. My husband needs personal items from his study for his comfort. The doctor suggested familiar objects might help stimulate his awareness. She held up an embroidered handkerchief as evidence, walking the housekeeper's expression soften at the mention of Fu Linen's recovery. Of course, Monsieur Fu. Please let me know if you require assistance. The housekeeper bowed slightly before continuing down the hallway. Alone in Fu Linen's private study, Jiangshu worked methodically, She'd developed a system over the past week, photographed documents with her phone, replaced them exactly as found, and later analyzed them during her meditation hours when no one dared disturb her. Today, she focused on the calendar from the months preceding the poisoning, noting meetings, business dinners, and unusual appointments. A pattern emerged in Fu Linan's schedule. 3 weeks before the poisoning, he'd had 5 consecutive meetings with someone identified only as J.L., each meeting followed by encrypted notes in a personal shorthand she couldn't decipher. Whoever this mysterious contact was, Fu Linan had taken extraordinary precautions to protect their identity and the content of their discussions. During her evening visit to Fu Linan's bedside, she described her findings while arranging flowers, aware that cameras monitored the room but couldn't pick up her whispered words. "Your mother hosted a tea ceremony on the day of your last meeting with JL," she murmured, gently adjusting the blanket over his legs. "The chef mentioned preparing special herbal infusions at her request that week. Did you drink anything unusual that day?" A single blink confirmed her suspicion. "Was it bitter?" Another blinked, with a slightly metallic aftertaste. 2 blinks. "No." "Sweet then? Like honey but not quite right?" A single, emphatic blink. Jiangshu pressed her lips together to hide her satisfaction. She was building a timeline, piece by piece. The compound RX7 could be masked by certain sweeteners without losing potency. Information she'd gleaned from medical journals, accessed through Fu Linan's personal tablet. Her investigations extended beyond documents. She cultivated relationships with household staff, particularly those who had served Fu Linan directly. During morning walks in the garden, she engaged elderly gardener Lao Wang, who had tended the Fu family grounds for 30 years. "Peonies are particularly beautiful," she commented, stopping to admire a vibrant cluster. "Were they Mr. Fu's favorite?" Lao Yang smiled, pride evident in his weathered face. The young master preferred chrysanthemums. Actually, he would sit by them often, especially when troubled by business matters. "Was he troubled often?" she asked, keeping her tone conversational. "It until the final weeks," Lao Wang replied, then glanced around nervously. "He argued with Madame Fu by the East Pavilion. I've never heard him raise his voice to his mother before." The gardener quickly returned to his pruning, clearly regretting his candor. Later that afternoon, Jianqian found herself drawn to the East Pavilion, ostensibly to enjoy the view. As she traced her fingers along the intricately carved railings, she discovered a small security camera, nestled among decorative woodwork, pointed directly at the conversation area. If there had been an argument, it might have been recorded. The security office was restricted, but the security director's assistant had taken a liking to Jiangshu after she helped with his sick daughter. Using this connection, she casually inquired about archived footage while bringing homemade soup for his family. "Madame Fu reviews security records herself," he explained apologetically. "Only she and Mr. Fu Cheng have the password to access archives beyond 7 days." This revelation further cemented her suspicions. Why would Fu Linyan's mother and brother need exclusive access to security footage? The threads of conspiracy were becoming clearer, weaving a tapestry of betrayal that extended to the highest levels of the Fu family. Her activities didn't go unnoticed. Fu Cheng began appearing unexpectedly during her daily routines, his calculated smile never reaching his eyes. "Sister-in-law, your devotion to my brother is admirable," he remarked, finding her in the family library researching chemical compounds. "But perhaps these medical texts are too technical for someone of your background? I could recommend simpler reading." Jiangshu closed the book slowly, allowing a flash of embarrassment across her features. "You're right, Brother Chung. I just thought if I understood more about your brother's condition, I might be more helpful." She purposely misplaced the bookmark, ensuring he wouldn't discover her true interests were focused on slow-acting poisons. "Your dedication is touching, but leave the medicine to the professionals," Fu Chen replied, patting her hand condescendingly. "By the way, I've noticed you spending considerable time in my brother's study. Is there something specific you're looking for?" The question carried a warning. Jiangshu needed to be more careful. "Just seeking connection to my husband," she answered softly. "The family portrait on his desk makes me feel closer to him somehow." Her breakthrough came unexpectedly. While retrieving a book from behind Fu Linyan's desk, she noticed a slight discoloration in the paneling that didn't match the surrounding wood. Pressing gently revealed a concealed compartment containing a small, leather-bound journal. Unlike the business documents she'd examined previously, this was personal. Handwritten observations about family members, business associates, and growing concerns about internal betrayal. The most damning entry came just 3 days before the poisoning. Mother insists I sample the new tea from Yunyan. Strange timing with the Meridian contract pending. Cheng unusually interested in my schedule this week. JL warns caution, says evidence points to family involvement in previous accidents. Will secure proof before confronting them. But it was a series of threatening notes, pressed between the journal's pages, that sent a chill down her spine. Elegant calligraphy on expensive paper, clearly from someone of means and education, with messages growing increasingly menacing. Reconsider your position on the merger. Family legacy requires sacrifice of personal principles. Defiance has consequences beyond yourself. Last warning, before remedial action becomes necessary. The handwriting matched samples she'd seen of Madame Fu's calligraphy, hanging in the ancestral hall. That night, she shared her discoveries with Fu Linian, using their coded communication system, watching pain flicker across his features as he confirmed his own mother's involvement. The journal mentions something called the Jade Emperor Protocol, she whispered. Is that significant? A single, urgent blink. Is it connected to Project Cerberus? Another affirmative blink, followed by 3 quick ones. Danger! Before she could ask more, the door opened to reveal Fu Cheng, his expression neutral, but eyes calculating. Sister-in-law, it's touching how you read to my brother each evening, he said, stepping into the room. What fascinating stories you must share. Jiangshu rose smoothly, bowing her head respectfully. Just everyday things. The doctors say familiar voices can be comforting. Fu Cheng approached the bed, studying his brother's face intently. Indeed, one wonders what he hears and understands. His gaze shifted to her, then to the journal she'd hastily tucked beneath a blanket. Mother requests your presence at breakfast tomorrow. A family matter requires discussion. After he departed, Jiangshu returned to Fu Linan's side, her composure faltering for the first time since their partnership began. They suspect something, she whispered, genuine fear creeping into her voice. Your mother? Your brother? They tried to kill you once. What's to stop them from? Fu Linan's fingers twitched against hers, squeezing with surprising strength for someone supposedly comatose. The gesture conveyed what words couldn't: reassurance, determination, and something that might have been affection. That gentle squeeze of Fu Linan's hand would be Jiangshu's final moment of peace before facing the full wrath of the Fu dynasty. As she prepared for the family meeting that morning, she couldn't silence the whispers of doubt growing louder in her mind. A comatose man's subtle finger movements might offer comfort, but what protection could they truly provide against those who controlled every asset, servant, and security camera in the mansion? The breakfast summons wasn't merely a meeting. It was a carefully orchestrated tribunal designed to strip her of everything. The ancestral hall of the Fu family mansion had never looked more imposing. Jiangshu paused at the threshold, taking in the 7 stern faces seated around the gleaming mahogany table. The morning light filtering through antique-stained glass cast everyone in an almost supernatural glow. At the head sat Madame Fu, her face a masterpiece of practiced neutrality. Fu Cheng occupied the right-hand position, the traditional place of the heir. Please join us, Jiangshu. Madame Fu's voice cut through the silence. We have matters of family importance to discuss. Jiangshu took the lone chair positioned at the opposite end, isolated, exposed, targeted. She folded her hands in her lap to hide their trembling, and raised her chin with a dignity that wasn't part of her old delivery uniform, but had become essential armor in this household. I've called this meeting to address concerns about the continued arrangement between Jiangshu and my brother, Fu Chen began, his voice carrying the practiced polish of business presentations. While we appreciate he opened the folder with theatrical precision, extracting what appeared to be bank statements. Our investigation has uncovered a pattern of suspicious financial activities, beginning precisely 3 days after Jiangshu entered our household. Madame Fu's eyebrows arched as Fu Cheng slid the documents toward her. Multiple transfers to offshore accounts, inquiries about Fu Holdings stock positions, and unusual access attempts to company servers from terminals within the mansion. The accusation hung in the air like poison gas. Jiangshu felt the weight of 7 pairs of eyes, dissecting her every reaction. The family council, comprised of Fu cousins and senior executives, shifted uncomfortably, their previous neutrality toward her curdling into suspicion. "These are fabrications," Jiangshu stated, her voice steadier than she felt. "I have made no such transaction." Fu Cheng's smile didn't reach his eyes. "The evidence suggests otherwise. Perhaps your background as a simple delivery person left you ill-equipped to cover your digital footprints. Our cybersecurity team has traced everything." He produced another document with a flourish. "We've also uncovered communications between you and representatives from Meridian Technologies, dating back 6 months before my brother's poisoning. Quite the coincidence, wouldn't you agree?" The implied accusation stunned her into momentary silence. Not just opportunism, but conspiracy. The family council members exchanged glances, their collective judgment solidifying. "I have never communicated with anyone from Meridian Technologies until the night of the gala, when I was cornered by Xiangwei," Jiangshu countered, her voice gaining strength from truth. "Those documents must be falsified." "A desperate claim from someone in a desperate position," Fu Qian replied smoothly. "Which brings me to my recommendation. Given these troubling discoveries and my brother's unchanging medical condition, I propose we annul this marriage immediately and remove Jiangshu from the household." He produced a third document, thicker, bound in legal covers. "Our family attorneys have prepared the necessary paperwork. Our medical team has provided certification that continuing this arrangement offers no therapeutic benefit. In fact, Dr. Zhang suggests the stress of maintaining this fiction may be impeding my brother's recovery." A gray-haired doctor seated at the table nodded gravely on cue. Jiangshu recognized him as one of the physicians who rarely attended to Fu Linian directly, but held significant influence with Madame Fu. "You're attempting to remove me because I've discovered too much," Jiangshu stated, abandoning caution. "This isn't about Fu Linan's recovery. It's about protecting those responsible for his condition." The council members stirred uncomfortably. This was clearly not in the script Fu Cheng'a had prepared for them. "How dare you make such accusations?" Madame Fu's voice cracked like a whip. "After everything this family has provided you," Jiangshu stood, forcing everyone to look up at her. "I agreed to be Fu Linan's wife, not a convenient scapegoat. I've discovered the threatening notes in his journal. I know about the Jade Emperor protocol and its connection to Project Cerberus. I know that someone in this room orchestrated my husband's poisoning, and I believe that person fears his recovery more than anything." Fu Chen's face darkened dangerously. "You've clearly been spending too much time in my brother's room, constructing fantasies." He slid the legal documents across the table. A fountain pen, solid gold, with the Fu family crest, followed. "Sign these papers, accept a generous settlement, and you can return to your former life with enough money to care for your parents for decades." The offer hung in the air, tempting, practical, final. For a heartbeat, Jiangshu considered how simple it would be to take the offer and escape this gilded cage forever. "I will not sign anything without my husband's consent," she declared instead. Fu Qian's careful composure cracked. "Your husband? He can't consent to anything. He's been unconscious." The doors burst open with dramatic timing that seemed almost orchestrated. Druckland, Fu Linan's primary physician, stood breathless in the entrance, his lab coat askew, eyes wide with excitement. "He's awake." The doctor's announcement landed like a thunderclap in the silent room. Young Master Fu requested his wife's presence immediately. The shock that rippled through the ancestral hall was almost tangible. Madame Fu rose from her seat, a hand clutching her jade pendant. "This is impossible. We just received his latest assessment yesterday." "It happened 20 minutes ago," Dr. Lin explained, still catching his breath. Complete consciousness, coherent speech, full recognition of his surroundings. It's unprecedented. The family council erupted into chaos. In the confusion, Jiangshu saw something flash across Fu Chengyi's face. Not surprise or joy at his brother's recovery, but cold, calculating fear. The procession to Fu Linan's medical suite felt dreamlike. Jiangshu found herself swept along in the middle of the family entourage, her heart hammering with a mixture of hope and panic. Had Fu Linan chosen this precise moment to awaken because he'd somehow sensed her danger? Or was this pure coincidence, the medical miracle they'd been waiting for arriving at the most dramatic moment possible? When they entered the suite, the transformation was striking. The medical machinery remained, but Fu Linan himself was sitting propped against pillows, pale but unmistakably alert. His eyes, intelligent, observant, and intensely focused, found Jiangshu immediately among the crowd. "My wife," he said, his voice hoarse from disuse but carrying unexpected authority. "I'd like to speak with her alone." Fu Qian stepped forward. "Brother, you've just awakened. There are medical considerations, family matters, and they can wait," Fu Linan interrupted with surprising strength. "My first priority is speaking privately with my wife." The word wife carried a weight that silenced every objection. Fu Linan's gaze swept the room, settling briefly on each face before returning to Jiangshu. "I understand there was a family meeting this morning regarding my marriage." Madame Fu composed herself first. "We were discussing arrangements in your best interest, given your condition." "My condition has changed," Fu Lan stated firmly, "and any decisions regarding my marriage will be made by me alone." As the room emptied with reluctant shuffling, Jiangshu found herself truly alone with Fu Linan for the first time. Not the unconscious man she'd whispered to for months, but a fully aware, intensely observant CEO whose piercing gaze now tracked her every movement. The air between them crackled with unspoken questions. 3 months of one-sided conversations suddenly weighed in the space between them, and neither knew how to bridge that gap. "You're nervous," Fu Linan observed, his voice stronger than one might expect from someone recently emerged from a comatose state. He adjusted himself against the pillows propping him up, wincing slightly at the movement. "After everything you've faced in this house, I'm surprised it's me that makes you uneasy." Jiangshu remained by the door, arms crossed protectively across her chest. "I'm not sure who you are," she admitted. "The man I've been talking to all these weeks, or the business tycoon I've read about in reports." A hint of a smile touched his lips. "Both. Neither. I'm still figuring that out myself." He gestured to the chair beside the bed. Her chair, where she'd spent countless hours reading to him, confiding in him, unknowingly baring her soul to a man who heard every word. "Please, sit. I believe we have much to discuss." She approached cautiously, perching on the edge of the seat, as if prepared for a quick escape. The silence stretched between them, heavy with implications. "How long?" she finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "How long have you been aware?" 6 weeks, he admitted without hesitation. "Initially just moments of consciousness. By the 4th week, I could follow conversations, feel sensations. And you," he paused, searching for words. "You were the constant." Jiangshu felt heat rising to her cheeks. "So you heard everything, all those private thoughts, the business reports, my complaints about your family." Her voice trailed off as the full implications hit her. "You let me believe I was talking to someone who couldn't hear me. Would you have been so honest if you'd known I was listening?" His question hung in the air between them, impossible to refute. "I needed truth, Jiangshu. In this house, it's the rarest commodity." She stood abruptly, pacing to the window. Outside, gardeners tended meticulously to sculpted hedges, their lives continuing unchanged, while hers had just been upended yet again. "You manipulated me," she said quietly, anger seeping into her tone, "just like everyone else in this family." "Yes?" His simple admission stopped her pacing. "Initially, you were just a tool, my eyes and ears, while I assessed who poisoned me." His directness was jarring after months of Fu family doublespeak. "I planned to divorce you once I had sufficient evidence. You would have received generous compensation, enough to fund those business classes you mentioned wanting to take." The casual way he referenced her private dreams stung more than his admission of using her. "How thoughtful," she replied, unable to mask the bitterness in her voice. "And now? What's the revised plan for your inconvenient wife?" Fu Linan studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "That's what I'm trying to determine. Nothing has gone according to plan since you arrived." "Including developing actual feelings?" A flash of vulnerability crossed his face before he could mask it. "That was unexpected." He looked down at his hands, the first sign of uncertainty she'd seen from him. "You spoke to me not as Fu Linan, heir to an empire, but simply as a man. You defended me when no one else would. You risked everything to uncover the truth." Jiangshu returned to her chair, suddenly needing to be closer, to see his expression clearly. "Those moments when I thought you were responding, the increased heart rate, the single tear, those were real." He nodded slowly. Your story about defending the elderly customer on your route who couldn't afford his medication. I'd never encountered that kind of selfless integrity before. It moved me. The memory hung between them, creating an unexpected intimacy. His revelation should have offered vindication, but instead, it complicated everything. For weeks, she'd constructed a version of Fu Linan in her mind, a silent confidant who couldn't judge her. The real man before her was far more complex. I don't know what happens now, she admitted. This marriage was never real. We're strangers who've been thrust into the most intimate relationship under false pretenses. It entirely false, he countered. You've shared more of yourself with me than anyone else in my life, and you know parts of me that even my family hasn't seen. Jiangshu laughed without humor. Yes, I know your business strategies and which classical composer helps you concentrate. That hardly constitutes a marriage. It's more than most marriages in my social circle, he replied with unexpected candor. Arranged unions based on business mergers and social standing. At least ours began with honesty, even if it was one-sided. She raised an eyebrow. Is that supposed to comfort me? No, he said softly. But it gives us something rare, a foundation of truth to build upon, if we choose to. His gaze held hers, and for the first time, she saw uncertainty in his eyes. This powerful man, who commanded empires with a word, seemed genuinely unsure of her response. The realization shifted something fundamental between them. What exactly are you proposing? She asked carefully. Divorce? Not yet? He leaned forward slightly, wincing at the effort. We face powerful enemies, both inside and outside this family. My recovery has forced their timeline, but not stopped their plans. You want me to continue playing the dutiful wife while we investigate? The practical logic appealed to her, even as she questioned his motives. I'm asking for time, he clarified. Time to see what might develop between us, without deception. When this is over, if you want that divorce and compensation, it's yours without question. But perhaps, he hesitated, perhaps we might discover something worth preserving. Jiangshu stared at the stranger who somehow knew her better than anyone. You actually believe we could build something real from this chaos? I believe you're the first person in my life who saw me as human, rather than a position or a prize. His voice had softened, revealing the man behind the businessman. That seems like rare ground worth exploring. A tentative silence settled between them, no longer hostile, but cautiously expectant. I'll stay, she finally agreed, temporarily, while we deal with whoever tried to kill you. After that, she left the sentence unfinished. The future, too uncertain to promise anything more. Relief visibly washed over him. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, she warned. I'm still processing the fact that you eavesdropped on months of my private thoughts. A smile, genuine this time, tugged at his lips, including your rather colorful assessment of my brother's business acumen. Heat flooded her cheeks as she remembered some of her more candid moments. Oh no, the fish import debacle, and your detailed theory about his toupee. Fu Lenon's smile widened, which, by the way, is surprisingly accurate. For the first time, laughter, spontaneous and unguarded, escaped her. The sound transformed his face, erasing years of calculated control. I thought I was safe venting to a comatose man. Your exact words were, "It looks like a drowned squirrel died on his head," he reminded her, his eyes crinkling with amusement. Stop! She covered her face, mortified yet unable to suppress her own laughter. I could never face him at breakfast again. Trust me. After years of enduring his self-importance, your observations were the highlight of my days. The warmth in his voice created an unexpected intimacy between them. Their shared laughter gradually subsided, leaving something new in its wake. A tentative connection built on shared secrets and unexpected honesty. They were still strangers in countless ways, forced together by bizarre circumstances. But in this moment, the impossible seemed slightly less so. She said quietly, "Where do we start?" His expression shifted back to the calculating businessman, but something softer remained in his eyes when he looked at her. We begin by letting everyone underestimate us, something you're particularly skilled at. The advantage lies in them believing they know exactly who we are. The irony wasn't lost on Jiangshu. For months, she'd been treated as insignificant by the Fu family, valued only as a symbolic cure. Now, that very underestimation might become their greatest weapon. The underestimation, that had once been Jiangshu's greatest burden, was about to become center stage in Fu Linan's most daring power play yet. 3 days after their agreement to maintain appearances while investigating his poisoning, Fu Linan called an emergency family meeting. The grand ancestral hall fell silent as he entered with a deliberate slowness that belied his recent recovery, leaning on an ebony cane more for dramatic effect than necessity. The words that left his mouth sent shockwaves through the room. "It's time I properly honored my wife with the wedding she deserves." Jiangshu stared at him in disbelief, her teacup frozen midway to her lips. A wedding? They already had the legal paperwork. Their relationship, while warming, remained tentative at best, a calculated partnership formed in crisis. When the family dispersed after a flurry of questions, she confronted him in his private study. "Have you lost your mind?" she whispered, mindful of potential eavesdroppers in the hallway. "We're already married on paper. Why draw more attention to something we don't even know will last?" Fu Linan's eyes gleamed with the same calculating intelligence that had built his business empire. "Because right now, you're vulnerable. The family sees our marriage as temporary, a superstitious remedy, easily discarded once I've recovered." He moved closer, his voice dropping lower. "A grand public ceremony changes everything. It transforms you from a disposable charm into my indisputable wife in the eyes." "This isn't about sentiment," he continued, studying her expression. "It's strategy. While all eyes focus on the spectacle of our wedding, we'll be watching to see who panics at your permanent installation in the family." Jiangshu recognized the brutal logic behind his plan, yet her stomach twisted at the thought of hundreds of judging eyes, elite socialites dissecting her every movement. "I'll be torn apart by your social circle. I've never even attended a formal dinner party, let alone starred in one." "Then we'll prepare you," Fu Linan said, with a confidence that bordered on arrogance. "I didn't build a global empire without knowing how to allocate resources. By our wedding day, you'll outshine everyone in that room." The following weeks became a whirlwind that left Jiangshu barely time to breathe. A team of etiquette consultants descended upon her daily, transforming the east wing of the mansion into a finishing school. She learned the precise angle at which to hold a champagne flute, the silent language of cutlery placement, and the diplomatic art of conversation that revealed nothing while seeming to share everything. Designer Wei Tianming, notorious for his 3-year waiting list, mysteriously appeared with an entire atelier in tow. "The Fu name opens doors," he said simply, when Jiangshu questioned how he'd cleared his schedule on such short notice. He circled her like a sculptor assessing marble, muttering about showcasing authentic beauty without erasing the story written in her hands. These hands, delivery girl hands, became the subject of intense treatments by dermatologists who promised miracles while exchanging concerned glances over calluses earned through years of honest work. Jiangshu drew the line when a consultant suggested surgical options to refine their features. "You can dress me up," she told Fu Linan that evening, "but I won't be reshaped into someone unrecognizable." To her surprise, he agreed immediately. "The authenticity that makes them uncomfortable is precisely what I value," he said, his eyes lingering on her face longer than necessary. Media interest intensified as invitations went out to government officials, business titans, and celebrities across Asia. Gossip columnists speculated wildly about the mysterious woman who had captivated the kingdom's most eligible bachelor during his darkest hour. Security protocols tightened around the mansion as paparazzi began camping outside the gates. "Breathe through it," instructed Miss Zhao, the formidable public relations director. "Remember, they're looking for weakness. Show none." She drilled Jiangshu through mock interviews, deliberately provoking her with increasingly personal questions, until Jiangshu could maintain perfect composure while deflecting the most intrusive inquiries. As the wedding approached, Jiangshu's anxiety peaked. One night, unable to sleep, she found herself wandering the mansion gardens, where she encountered the elderly groundskeeper Lao Wang tending night-blooming jasmine. "Lady," he said without looking up, "the flowers don't care if you were born in a palace or a village. They respond to how you treat them, not where you come from." His weathered hands gently guided a climbing vine. The same is true of the wisest people. The night before the ceremony, after the rehearsal dinner concluded, Fu Linan requested Jiangshu join him in his private study. The room felt different at night, less intimidating. Moonlight filtered through antique windows, casting long shadows across centuries-old furniture. "I have something for you," he said, sliding an envelope across his desk. Inside were legal documents transferring ownership of multiple properties, substantial investment portfolios, and a minority stake in Fu Industries' most profitable subsidiary to her name. "What is this?" she asked, heart racing, as she calculated the astronomical figures. "Insurance," he replied simply. "Whatever happens between us, whether this becomes real or ends tomorrow, you will never again be at anyone's mercy, including mine." Jiangshu stared at the papers, understanding the magnitude of what he'd done. Not a prenuptial agreement protecting his assets, but a transfer ensuring her independence regardless of their future. For a man who controlled everything in his domain, this deliberate relinquishment of power spoke volumes. "Thank you," she whispered, overcome by the implications. "But why?" Fu Linan's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "Because some things should be chosen freely, not coerced by circumstance or necessity." He hesitated, then added more quietly, "And some people deserve security after a lifetime without it." The wedding day arrived with military precision. The Fu family gardens transformed into an enchanted landscape where traditional Chinese elements blended seamlessly with modern luxury. 500 guests gathered under silk pavilions as Jiangshu prepared in a suite filled with attendants. Studying her reflection in the mirror, she barely recognized herself in the spectacular crimson gown embroidered with gold phoenixes that had required 20 artisans working continuously for 6 weeks. The woman looking back at her stood taller, her eyes clearer and more confident than the delivery girl who had stumbled into this world months ago. When she appeared at the ceremony, the collective intake of breath was audible. Fu Linan, resplendent in traditional attire, watched her approach with an intensity that made her forget the hundreds of eyes tracking her every step. For this moment, they existed in a bubble of their own making. The ceremony proceeded flawlessly, until the moment Fu Linan was to speak his vows. Instead of reciting the traditional phrases they had rehearsed, he set aside the ceremonial scroll and addressed not just Jiangshu, but the assembled guests. "Many of you wondered why I insisted on this ceremony when we are already legally wed," he began, his voice carrying across the hushed garden. "You speculated about business advantages, family traditions, or perhaps my brush with mortality changing my perspective." He turned fully toward Jiangshu, his voice softening. "The truth is both simpler and more complex. When I lay between life and death, unable to speak or move, one person treated me not as an asset to be managed or an obstacle to be overcome, but as a human being deserving of dignity and kindness. One person spoke truth to me when they thought no one was listening." A murmur rippled through the crowd as Fu Linan continued. "Marriage can begin for many reasons: convenience, tradition, alliance. But today, I choose to honor what ours has become, rather than how it began." Their story, which began as a mere transaction, a comatose CEO and his medicinal bride, transformed into something the Fu dynasty's schemes could never have predicted. As Jiangshu and Fu Linan stood together at their wedding reception, watching dignitaries and business titans mingle beneath cascading lanterns, they exchanged a private glance that spoke volumes. "They never saw it coming," Fu Linan whispered, his fingers intertwining with hers, "that the antidote would become the cure." In the quiet strength of their unexpected bond lay their true power, not in wealth or status, but in a partnership forged through deception yet tempered by truth.